tonight. Regina police say 2023 was the second worst year on record for overdose deaths in the city. Also, what Canada's new limit on international students could mean for Saskatchewan. Plus, blind and partially sighted kids get a day on the ice with the Saskatoon Blades.
This is CBC Saskatchewan News.
It is Tuesday, January 23rd, and the CBC Saskatchewan News starts right now. I'm Ethan Williams in for Sam McKeag. Thanks for joining us tonight. 2023 is now the second deadliest year on record for drug overdoses in Regina. Data released today from the Regina Police Service shows 151 apparent drug overdoses last year. That's less than the record of 164 set in 2021. Regina's chief of police says his officers deal with the effects of drug toxicity every day, but that doesn't mean they can be the solution.
The overdose rates have gone up, and my staff do their best to get there to try and support and try and help. But it's difficult because with overdoses, there's not a lot we can control as a police service.
The province continues to grapple with the issue of drug toxicity. Last week, the government announced a shift to what it calls a recovery-oriented system of care. It will no longer provide clean pipes to smoke drugs or literature on how to use pipes safely. Third parties can't use provincial money to do that either. The government is also requiring needle exchanges to receive used needles before providing clean ones. The move left experts and frontline workers baffled. All this as the latest provincial coroner service data shows last year may have been the deadliest for drug overdoses in Saskatchewan since data collection began in 2010. A federal court has ruled the government's decision to invoke the Emergencies Act during the 2022 convoy protests in Ottawa was unreasonable. The act was invoked to clear protesters who were upset with Canada's COVID-19 pandemic response, including vaccine requirements.
I don't want to minimize the gravity of the actions we took. Neither do I want to minimize the gravity of the threat Canada faced. And to your question,
Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland says the government will appeal the ruling. The case was brought forward by the Canadian Civil Liberties Association and other groups. They argued Ottawa ushered in measures without sound statutory grounds. The judge ruled that protests did not meet the legal threshold for a national emergency. Today's ruling is at odds with the findings of a public inquiry published last year. It found the federal government was justified in invoking the act and met the high legal standard for using the law. Today was the 7th day of testimony at the inquest into Canada's worst mass stabbing. 11 people were killed and 17 wounded at Smith Cree Nation and Weldon in September of 2022. The health director at James Smith Health Clinic says if recommendations are to be laid out about how to improve the safety of the community, he wants to be part of that process. Outside the inquest, Mike Marion told reporters he feels like they're not being given an opportunity to tell their story. He says he's frustrated there's been no mention of how health clinic staff helped in the crisis.
Jury to know that we were part of this. We were part of this from the community with our support staff, our first responders, our first aid people, but there's no mention of it. When you ask a question to the EMS or other agencies how we were supporting them, they didn't know. They don't know how we supported them.
Marion says the health clinic assigned one mental health therapist to each family after the crisis, and he says that work continues. And today at the inquest, there was also more testimony from those working in the parole and correctional systems. For more on this, the CBC's Jason Warwick joins us now from Melfort. Jason, today we heard more about Miles Sanderson's past. What did you learn?
Ethan, we heard that during one of Mr. Sanderson's stints in prison, he was making actually a lot of progress, seeing elders, taking programming. But despite that, the parole officials who testified today said that he was still designated what they call a low chance of successful reintegration into society. We heard from parole officer Jessica Dix. I'll just read you a little bit about what she said. She said, Mr. Sanderson, when he was first in prison, he started out with a very adversarial attitude and was accusatory. My impression was that he didn't want to be told what to do, but over time he opened up. He worked with an elder. He was willing to accept advice in a healthy way. We did see his behavior progress. She talked about, during this latest stint in prison, how he passed all his drug tests, was not involved in any fights, and investigations found no connections to gangs. So in some ways, they were feeling hopeful about it, but they did realize that being successful in prison is one thing and being successful in the community is another. And his long history of reoffending, some of his problematic behavior led them to designate him as a low chance of success. And unfortunately, when he was eventually released, he shortly after did violate his parole, and months later, violate his parole, a warrant was issued, and several months later, these mass stabbings occurred, Ethan. And we heard from others at this inquiry today and in previous days about why he was even let out on parole, and they talked about how he had served his time. He had got to his statutory release date, and they had to release him from prison. Some were asking why he wasn't declared a dangerous offender, and the officials who testified said that had he survived this mass stabbing incident, he certainly would have been a candidate for the dangerous offender status. But to the point of these mass stabbings on September 4th, 2022, he had not committed murder. He had not committed these very serious offenses that can lead to that very serious designation, Ethan.
And Jason, what do we expect to hear about tomorrow?
Well, there's growing concern, as we just heard before this, from members of James Smith about how we're hearing from a lot of the outsiders that came and helped at James Smith. And everyone says those are valid perspectives and important voices to learn. But they are increasingly concerned. Chief Calvin Sanderson just spoke to us and others about how the voices of the people at James Smith who helped that day, who helped in the days following to keep people's mental health intact, are not being heard sufficiently. Chief Sanderson actually was asked about the inquest in general, and he said that's the coroner's process. It's not ours, Ethan.
All right, Jason, thank you for this.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Jason Warwick joining us from Melfort. Shots were fired and a Molotov cocktail was thrown at Edmonton City Hall today. A council meeting was recessed immediately and the building was evacuated. Police arrested one person and the building was searched. No injuries have been reported. The mayor and city councillors were in a meeting of the Emergency Advisory Committee when loud bangs were heard in the building. An investigation is underway. The Canadian government says it will cut the number of undergraduate study permits it provides to international students this year. Compared with 2023, it's about a 35% cut. But experts say here in Saskatchewan, there's the potential for more international students to come. Dane Patterson explains.
Experts believe the new international student permit policy will hit hardest in eastern provinces like Ontario and Nova Scotia. In Saskatchewan, they predict a less noticeable effect. Yet, at the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon, mixed reactions from international students. On one hand,
if you still let a lot of students come in bulk and you don't provide them the adequate resources that they need to have a better life in Canada and a better educational support, it's actually doing injustice to them.
I know why they're doing that, but I believe it's putting a lot of people in difficult situation, a lot of aspiring students.
But on the other hand,
it's actually a good thing for the authorities and the government to manage and check their resources as the population is rising on both in the international part and the domestic population.
As many do, these international students hear cap and think that means fewer students. But depending on how the government decides to divvy out the total cap of 360,000 permits, experts say more could land here.
So if we have a surplus, some of that demand could get diverted to us. Now, if you have people who are looking to study in Halifax or Toronto or other places because they have family or other connections there, that's probably not going to work out so well for them.
Saskatchewan makes up 3% of Canada's total population. The federal government says the allocation model will be released after talking with provinces and territories, but it's based on population. So while other provinces are forced to cut, Saskatchewan might have room to expand.
You want a way to think about this. You squish the balloon in one place, what happens? Well, it inflates somewhere else.
In the past, the limit was discussed as a way to ease the housing demand. Right now, at least, Child says international students aren't putting enough strain on housing in Saskatchewan to cause an issue. Dane Patterson, CBC News, Saskatoon.
A blind woman in Saskatoon says she hopes her experience can be a learning moment after a restaurant refused entry to her guide dog last month. The restaurant has since apologized, but as Moira Whiten reports, one advocate says this still happens far too often.
Cheryl Dolan was looking forward to a meal here with her husband, her sister, and brother-in-law, until the staff at Tamarind Restaurant told her that her guide dog couldn't join them.
Right away, the two young ladies at the front desk said, no, you can't bring a dog in. And I've had that kind of experience before, but in the past, I've always just said, yes, it is a rule of Canada that we are allowed to bring our guide dogs, seeing eye dogs, into any public place. And they ran to the back and got the owner. And the owner came out and he said, absolutely not my restaurant.
The former voice instructor lost her vision 30 years ago as a result of type 1 diabetes. She says she showed the man her registration for 11-year-old Hudson, but he didn't look at it.
All the times I've been in other parts of Canada, in the States, I have never, ever felt discriminated against. And it was not a nice feeling.
Oh, one of the principal feelings initially was shock and surprise.
Yeah.
Like, how could you not know this?
Saskatchewan's Human Rights Code prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities, and the province's Human Rights Commission says service animals must be allowed in all public spaces, including restaurants. Tamarind says it deeply regrets what happened and will increase staff training on guide dogs. The staff members on duty were students, new to the restaurant, and they were hired to do their first job in Canada. They were not aware of the proper protocol for registered service animals. We would like to extend our sincerest apologies to the couples and their service dog for the unfortunate incident that occurred. We want to assure you that we are taking immediate steps to address and rectify the situation. One advocate says education is key.
The guide dogs are an integral part of them being independent and being able to go about their day. And it's frustrating for people and it's degrading and it does take a toll because it does happen more than it should.
The Dolans agree. They have filed a human rights complaint hoping to prevent future issues.
Don't take this as being a punishment, but as a learning experience.
And we've heard that the food is really, really good. And we certainly don't want their business to suffer.
Tamarind has invited the couple back for dinner, free of charge. The Dolans say they look forward to it, though they're happy to pay. Moira Whiten, CBC News.
A new exhibit in Saskatoon is celebrating Métis women and history. Ribbon skirts have grown as a symbol of cultural reclamation for Indigenous women. They are worn to celebration, ceremony, and in some cases daily as a symbol of cultural pride. The Gabriel Dumont Institute has co-organized an exhibition about Métis ribbon skirts, and the skirts do have differences.
Indigenous women are embracing their culture, and the ribbon skirts is one way that's been a contemporary thing to do for a little while now. For the Métis style ribbon skirt, we really paired it off of historical images of full-bodied skirts with ruffles at the bottom, sometimes multiple ruffles, sometimes ruffles of different colors, and then these beautiful bands of ribbon that go around the bottom of the skirts.
Briley says taking ownership of her Métis identity was really important, and the Métis ribbon skirt is another way to do that. The exhibition came out of a book collaboration that was researched and written by Bonnie Johnson and Leah Dorian. You can find the exhibit at the Saskatchewan Craft Council in Saskatoon through March 9th. Well, flowing water, warmer temperatures, and not a lot of snow. It looks more like March than January in Saskatoon today. And what we have left of the snow could disappear over the next week. Another warm-up is coming. I'll have your full forecast after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Canada Post is honoring North America's first Black female newspaper publisher. A new stamp featuring Marianne Shad Carey was unveiled today. She started a paper in Windsor, Ontario in 1853. Meg Roberts has the story.
I'd never heard of her before.
It was a trip to the museum in North Buxton, a community located outside Chatham, Ontario, known as one of the last stops on the Underground Railroad, that Adrienne Shad found out about her great-great-great-aunt, Marianne Shad Carey.
I was absolutely astounded.
Astounded at the magnitude of her ancestor's life. Born to a family of Delaware abolitionists in 1823, Marianne Shad Carey moved to what is now Windsor, Ontario, opening a school for the children of freedom seekers. Later, she would become the first Black woman in North America to publish and edit a newspaper, the Provincial Freeman.
She seemed fearless in her endeavors. She didn't seem to be afraid to criticize Black male leaders, white male leaders.
Going by her initials to not disclose her gender, she encouraged Black immigration to Canada through the publication, speaking candidly about slavery in the mid-1800s.
And she is certainly someone whose story needs to be better known. This is the only photo we have.
Family members like Irene Moore Davis know the impacts Shad Carey has had on the nation's history. Like many relatives, she's dedicated her career to telling it. And she's hoping with the help of Canada Post, more Canadians will get to learn it too. In honor of Black History Month, Canada Post has unveiled its newest stamp.
It means so much pride for our family.
The stamp was collaborated on by family members who gathered to see the final product in Chatham, Ontario, but also for a rare opportunity to reunite.
It's nice to see people and just enjoy the moment and celebrate the iconic Marianne Shad Carey.
Marianne Shad's family members celebrating the work she left behind, but it's with their help her legacy of activism and education lives on. Meg Roberts, CBC News, Chatham, Ontario.
The weather update is brought to you by Capital GMC Buick Cadillac. Level Up Your Ride event is on now.
Well, the sun pretty much set on Regina here as we come to the end of what has been a pretty warm day, but what is turning into a bit of a misty and foggy evening, as you can see. Temperatures, though, through much of south and central Saskatchewan, pretty much all the province, definitely warming up as we take a look at our current temperatures. That -13, -14 in the north is above seasonal for this time of year, and of course that brings you out of the near -30 temperatures that we saw in that part of the province yesterday. But it's really through south and central where we've had a warm front move through, and that still has our temperatures in many places near freezing in south central and southwestern Saskatchewan, into the minus single digits elsewhere. And it's a big change for south and central on where we were yesterday at 4 o'clock compared to today at 4 o'clock. Some places as much as 12, 13 degrees warmer than yesterday, including places like Saskatoon, Maple Creek, and Swift Current. A little bit of snow earlier today, especially in northern Saskatchewan. That is starting to move out now, and clouds beginning to clear away more substantially in southern portions of the province. And that is expected to continue through the night tonight. But winds have been a little bit breezy, as I mentioned, in southern Saskatchewan especially, and we're still seeing those gusts a little bit as of right now. That warm front, on the other side of it at least, we will see clouds start to build back in a little bit overnight tonight. And again, fog a possibility for many locations throughout the southern half of the province. Cloud again for some tomorrow. We could see some breaks of sun here and there, but I think more substantial clearing as we get into Thursday. A couple of rounds of snow possible, especially for the very far north of the province. Not too much in the way of wind. I think as we see a bit of that system moving through the north Thursday, winds could pick up a little bit in southern Saskatchewan. But again, fog and mist definitely going to be a concern for many communities overnight tonight, especially for the commute tomorrow morning, especially in southern Saskatchewan. And even as we get into tomorrow afternoon and evening, we could start to see that build back in. Another night of very low visibilities with fog as we get into early Thursday morning. For Regina, temperatures drop a little bit heading into tomorrow. We'll see a high of around -5, but then there is much improvement after that. Pacific air rushes in. We see temperatures well above seasonal, well in to those plus single digits, and lots of sunshine as well. Saskatoon again, we said it felt more like March today. Well, this is a forecast that's going to feel more like maybe even April as we head into the weekend. And as we get into next week with those overnight lows getting pretty close themselves to the freezing mark. Stay with us. We'll have more news after the break. Republican presidential hopeful Nikki Haley jumped out to an early lead in today's primary voting in New Hampshire. In a decades-long tradition, the very first votes of the first primary are cast just after midnight in the tiny community of Dixville Notch. Haley is the only Republican left challenging Donald Trump. She was the unanimous choice, taking all 6 of the ballots cast. Trump remains far and away the front runner, though, polling at 52% to Haley's 36%. The results in New Hampshire could determine whether Haley continues her campaign. Well, a pretty warm evening in Regina. Again, clear skies, but there is a good chance that we'll see that fog develop. We're already seeing it now in the city, likely going to be hanging on at periods overnight. That'll clear away in the morning with a temperature of around -9. We'll see a mix of sun and cloud, a little bit of cloud cover building in through the night. But the sun shouldn't be too obscured. We are looking for that sun to stick around as we head into the afternoon. Notice those nice light winds. They are shifting from the northwest, so a little bit more of a brisk feel today means that we'll only be sitting around -7 by the noon hour. Still pretty good for this time of year. In Saskatoon, -7 is where we'll be at midnight tonight, and again, the possibility of fog for you as well before we see that clear tomorrow morning. Skies will stay mostly cloudy, though. Light winds of a temperature of around -9. Into the afternoon, we're looking for a little more cloud cover for Saskatoon, though I think you'll be sitting under mostly cloudy skies with a noon temperature sitting around -7. And before we leave you, a really neat opportunity for aspiring blind athletes in Saskatoon to try out hockey alongside the Saskatoon Blades.
It's one of our fastest growing programs across the country in Saskatoon, so we definitely want to focus on the community out here and continue to develop the next wave of blind hockey all-stars.
My favorite part about coming here and being able to do this is all the youth and children who are just getting on ice for their first time, and they haven't been given this experience, and it's very special to them, and it's very special to me that I get to help them and things like that.
Canadian Blind Hockey hosted Try Blind Hockey at SaskTel Centre today. It was a chance for people between 4 and 20 years old to hit the ice. The day started with a sensory tour of the arena and change rooms, and after a pizza lunch, they got to gear up, try out the equipment, and learn from and play with the Saskatoon Blades. A similar event will be held in Regina tomorrow at the Brandt Centre with the Regina Pats. Great stuff, and that is it for us tonight. For news anytime, of course, you can head to cbc.ca/sask, subscribe to our CBC Saskatchewan YouTube channel, or download the CBC News app. Thanks for watching. Have a great night.